Good evening and welcome to TDM Talk Show. The history of the Portuguese presence in Asia is still to some extent underrated. It all began in the late 15th century and continued throughout the 16th century when officers, sailors and traders sailed all the way from Europe's westernmost country to the wide Asian continent. First in India and then Sri Lanka, Malacca, Japan, Macau of course, and pretty much all over Southeast Asia, including Burma, the country nowadays officially known as Myanmar. And that's where our guest comes into the picture. James Myint Swe is a descendant of those officers who settled in Burma some 4 centuries ago. He is the author of a book that tells their story. The volume is called Kenyan Soldiers of Burma. Mr. James Myint Swe, thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here to explain and tell the story about my book, because it's about the history of the Portuguese in Burma, which is very little known to many parts of the world, as well as including in Burma. So I really appreciate it for that.
It's our pleasure. Before talking about their history, let's start by looking at your story.
Well, I was born in Burma, in the middle of Burma, where Yeu is the place where I was born. Chanayua is the place. This is the place where the first Portuguese were settled in 1633, somewhere around that time. And this Yeu was usually called in Portuguese the Raiu, which is the name of it's called river. Then in Burmese they become Yeu. That's where I was born in 1948. So I'm in the almost late 60s. And I went to Canada when I was 27, 6. So I immigrated to Canada in 1976. Since then I lived there for about more than 42 years now. The interest was so much in me because when I was young, my parents and my grandparents talked to us about how the great-grandparents lived and adopted to the Burmese culture and serving the Burmese kings and things like that. That's why that's part of my little history.
So the rationale behind writing this book lies pretty much in your own biography and your ancestors and the oral history that has been transmitted from generation to generation.
Yeah, like my grandfather, his grandfather, they all served for the Burmese king in that time. So they told us all the histories that have been carried on from the generations. So they have been telling us all these history for so many times, but we were young and we don't know too much about it. But nice to listen to the stories, Then when I grew older and then came out of the country, I started reading some of the books. And what the book says and what they said has come some kinds of connection in there. So I become more interested in that. So I just keep on reading and searching for books, and then I become more interested to tell the world what's going on in there. Because there's very few things that's written in Burma about the Portuguese in Burma.
Mm-hmm. And then we have this book here that we've got here. We've been mentioning it, Kenyan Soldiers of Burma. Tell us about the very first draft that came to your mind. You felt the need to come up with this book, but you were also encouraged, right?
Yeah. Like, the first thing was, I met, when I was in school, met some professor, the history professor, and then the other professor introduced me to another professor who was specializing in the Portuguese history in Burma. He said, well, you should write something about the Portuguese history in Burma because nobody write about it. Besides, the Portuguese involvement in Burma is very crucial because Burma in those days, in the late 40s, late 1400 and early 1500, Burma was only a small part of the land between Taungu and Pa. And then when the Portuguese arrived there with guns and cannons, the Burmese government, the Burmese king hired these Portuguese and mercenaries, and they fought the whole part of the war, and that Burma became a big country. So they should give some credit to the Portuguese involvement in Burma. That's why I like to tell the world and the Burmese people about this.
So who were they, those Portuguese who arrived in Burma in the early 16th century?
Well, there are a lot of names in there. I don't remember all of them. But
were they were sailors, traders, officers, missionaries?
They are all together. They all come in the same group. Like when the ship come, there are about 3 to 7 ships together. Some are sailors, some are soldiers, some are merchants, some are missionaries. So one name is very popular is De Mello. De Mello is one of the generals that is hired by the Burmese king, Dezembro, Myint, and Nanda kings. He was the leader of all the Portuguese soldiers that was fought for Burma for many, many years. And he died there too. When the Hmong rebelled against the Burmese king, they fought for the Burmese king and he got killed at that time. And he was very near Taungoo. That's one of the interesting things. We want to find out where he is.
There's plenty of very interesting and unique features about the Portuguese presence in Asia, and namely in Burma. So I'd like you to, for those of us and for the viewers who are not familiar at all with the importance of the Portuguese in the history of Burma, what's so special about it?
Well, that's the special thing, is like what I said earlier. The involvement of the Portuguese created Burma as a contemporary country. Because of the Portuguese, the Burmese win the war against other ethnic like the Arrogans, the Hmongs, and the Shans. Without the Portuguese involvement in there with the cannons and guns, they will never win the war. Because the guns and cannons are the high-tech weapons in those days, and they are the only ones that know how to handle it. So the Burmese kings really give favor to these people, to the Portuguese missionaries, mercenaries, soldiers, and gunners as his bodyguard, his palace guard, and the front line. They are the one who fought for it. So they got they got a very good priority to these Portuguese soldiers.
So we had, of course, traders, officers, and then some of them actually became, a number of them became mercenaries, fighting for different sides.
Both sides, yeah. In those days, Burma and Thailand have a war every about 15, 20 years. They're always fighting. On the Thai side, they are Portuguese too, and on the Burmese side, they are Portuguese too. The same thing in Burma in the local. On the Arakan side, they are Portuguese serving the Arakan kings. The same side on the Burmese, they are Portuguese serving the Burmese king too. When they fight, both of the Portuguese are fighting each other too.
And then this continued throughout the 16th century.
Yeah, 1613, up to 1613, it was like that. After 1613, the Arakan king, Myint Swe, he took over the whole country. He was very strong, so he took over the whole country. The Dezembro died, and the Myint died, and then Dezembro came. Dezembro died, and then his sons, Nanda came. He was very weak. So the Arakan king starting to take over the whole country. So the Portuguese were, like serving the Myint Swe. So the Arakan king gave Dezembro a territory in Syria, which is called Tanlian right now.
And where is it located? I mean,
it is southern part of Burma. When you cross from Burma, from Rangoon to the Rangoon River to the other side, it's called Tanlian. Now it's called, it used to be called Syrian, but now Tanlian. That's why Dezembro become a governor of this state. But the problem is, when the government gave him all the authorities to look after it, he becomes so greedy and he started, go against the king, which gave him, to rule the area. Then Dezembro become the very influenced, very powerful king, territory governor. And then he get out of hand and he fought against his own master. So the Arakan king got so mad. At the same time, Burma was crumbling between all the Burmese, what they call warlords and little kingdoms, are fighting each other. So Arakan came in, starting to take over everywhere. And then the other Burmese king from Taungoo, from Inwa, starting to reorganize and starting to fight. And the Burmese king, Dezembro, Dezembro lost the war. So when Dezembro lost the war in 1613, all these Portuguese become a prisoner of war.
And what happened to them after 1613?
So 1613, somewhere in about Christmas time, after New Year, that's the time they lost the war. So they all got arrested. All the senior members in the army, Portuguese army, they all got killed. But other juniors and other soldiers, they were all, become a prisoner of war, and they were taken to the northern Burma.
How many people are we talking about?
They are actually the Portuguese from Europe, roughly about 500 to 700 people. And then the mixed race and other loyal Portuguese, the local people, altogether about 4,000 people. That's what it says in the book. About 4,000 Portuguese were transferred to the Inwa. Inwa is where the king palace is. That's about 500 miles to the north.
And you were saying they became prisoners of war?
Yeah.
but they were spared, right?
Yeah, the king told even the guards, don't harm these people. These are my treasure. All these white people know how to use the guns and cannons. So
Because of their knowledge, technology, in
yeah,
terms of
so
war technology.
there's advanced technology in those days. So they brought them there. But at the same time, that Untitled Myint, that was his name is Untitled Myint, because he was killed in the west part of the river. So that's why his name is Untitled Myint. And Untitled is the west, Lon is king. So the king died on the western side of the river. Anyway, when he died, he is the one that's trying to reorganize the king Burma like used to be before during the Dezembro time. So he was fighting all over the world. So he brought these prisoners and he left it in Inwa for about 15 years because he was trying to have a battle all over the country. So they were left there. It's the place called Ngayebyayua. It's where the first Portuguese settled there.
And then even after that period, so there's been still some Portuguese influence in the following 300 years.
Yeah.
How was that reflected? I mean,
because after the Untitled Myint king died, another one of his cousins took over the country. But he's a very nice gentleman, gentle king. His name is Talon. So he was a nice king, and he feels sorry and pity about these Portuguese prisoners. So they have an agreement. You all have to serve as hereditary gunners and cannon soldiers for me, and you all will be pardoned. You all will be free. So they agree with that time, and because at that time the Portuguese prisoners were led by De Brito's wife. Her name is Luisa. Luisa is the head of all these Portuguese.
Luisa de Brito.
Yeah, Luisa de Brito, and two priests, Father Nunes and Father Fonseca. These three people led all these Portuguese to follow and move to the middle part of Burma.
You're mentioning a priest, missionaries, and the Catholic element here plays a pivotal role. Right?
Yeah,
they all the way to now.
Yeah, that's why arrival of the Portuguese and the arrival of the Catholic Church is about the same. If you talk about the arrival of the Catholic Church, you have to talk about the Portuguese too. So same thing, when you talk about the Portuguese in Burma, you have to talk about the Catholic Church because they're all the same. They all come about the same time. But arrival of the time and the assimilated and settlement is not the same. After 1613, afterward, these Portuguese descendants, they've grown up in Burma and born and raised in there, they become a Burmese citizen. They don't even know where Portuguese is after that. They become mostly like a Burmese, and that is 400 years after that. So we have a celebration of 400 years of the Portuguese settlement and 500 years of the Catholic Church.
And how different were these Portuguese from other Europeans who eventually and later on settled, at least for a period of time, in Burma and elsewhere in Southeast Asia, and were traders? What's the main difference? Because many historians point to fundamental differences.
Yeah, there's a history, it says in there, when the Portuguese came to Asia or in Burma, they came as adventurers. They really risked their life and trying to see the world, what things are like. Then they do the risk and do some business with the local people, that's all. But when the British and French came, they come as a corporate. They're going to buy it and they're going to expand it, and they just consider about the business. Portuguese were not like that. They didn't come to any country, like especially in Burma, they didn't come to Burma to occupy the land. They come then to do the trading for the military. And then they serve the kings. They don't go inside and fight and take over the territory. Because the Portuguese were really good with the sea, with the sea power. So they don't go inside land, inland to occupy. They can go so far where the gun can reach. So they stay mostly on the shore. So they don't go too far. But the British and the French, when they come, they look at the resources and they take over everything. It's a cooperation, corporate ideas. Portuguese are not like that.
And there's also this issue of intermarriage.
Yeah. When the Portuguese came, the Albuquerque, he told the soldiers and the military people, everywhere you get there, you have to join with them, assimilation with them and marry the local. That way we were going to populate the people. But it's a different thing. When you assimilate, you don't want to go back home to Portugal. They all settled there. Yeah. Another thing, different situation with the British and French is they came in a different situation, different technology. The prisoners of the Portuguese at that time was nothing in there. Besides, the Portuguese was settled in the middle of Burma, which is about 400 miles from the ocean. They have been so isolated in the middle of Burma where they cannot have contact to any foreign land. So when the British and French came, they were just along the oceans and along the rivers. So they have the communication with the sea line that time, seaways.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at this book, in terms of the genre, it's a bit mixed somehow, because we do have historical facts, real people's names, right? Yeah. But there's a bit of a novelization when it comes, for instance, to some Burmese characters. Yeah. Tell us about the whole rationale behind your, I would say, original approach to the book.
First, when I wrote the book, I have so much ideas that I want to tell the whole story. So I wrote the book originally like a first paragraph, history, second paragraph, a novel. So I was reading each chapter's novel, history. So when I finished it, I gave it to the editing company to do the editing, and they said, Jim, don't do this, because some people want to read only history, some people want to read only, novel. So make it into two. That way you can give the two audience who want to read the history, who want to read the novel. So that's why I wrote this as a novel. The reason I have to do some part of those, some of the Portuguese and the Burmese, separation in there is, I want the Burmese to like the history by reading it in the Burmese content with the Burmese part of it. That makes them interested to read the Portuguese history. That's why I put the Burmese section. But on the Portuguese side, the name, the date, and place where it happened, they are exactly from the history. These are not fiction.
What about your research? It took you?
It took me 10 years to do the research. I have to go
you
traveling.
Consulted documents, archives, right? I
have to go to Europe, to Portugal, England, things like that. Because in England, there are lots of documents about the Burmese document, histories, novel, the pamphlets written on the palm leaves, and some of the documents that's like these pictures. Like these are all drawn on the...
Actually, these pictures here of the book that we've got here, this depicts the Portuguese, right?
Yeah, those are the Kenyan soldiers in the middle there.
Kenyan soldiers, yes.
Yeah, and that's one of the military parade. They had it in that time. These are the Portuguese soldiers.
Okay, so
that's why this is the Kenyan soldiers of Burma.
Kenyan soldiers, yes.
Yeah, this is on a drawing, original drawing that I got permission from the British Library to use it for my book. I have to apply for the permission. I have to pay for the fees.
Looking back, and it's you are in a, I would say, privileged vantage point, because you are Burmese, but you're not based in Burma for over 40 years.
40 years,
and you are a descendant of Portuguese. In terms of your own identity and your approach to this volume, tell us about it. Was there any conflict or not really?
No, like we used to say, if you are an immigrant to other countries, you have the feeling of your motherland and the country where you settle. We call it a man loves two women at the same time. But the woman is your wife and the other woman is your mother. So you love your mother country, and the place where you stay and settle and live together is your wife. Same like that. You love the two women at the same time. You love two countries at the same time. That kind of feeling we have. Like that.
And what's left of the Portuguese presence in Burma, in nowadays Myanmar?
In Burma, when you go to these two villages, two river valley settlements.
If you go there now, what are the remains of that presence?
The first remain you're going to see is, if you go to these villages, you're going to see the people that still have the, faces, like hairs and eyes and skin color. They are still almost like a Portuguese. Even after 400-500 years, they still have the, facial.
They are Eurasians somehow, but of a special kind, right?
Yeah, so you will see the first thing. That's the vision. Visually, you're going to see the face and things like that. And then second thing is, you're going to see the churches in there. Every villages have the big churches in the middle of the villages, and they are very strong Catholics. That's the main thing that they carry on through the Portuguese descendants, Portuguese culture, norm, and things like that. Even though they don't speak Portuguese language or they don't have the name.
What about the prayers?
Prayers are all in Burmese, but they still have their old traditional Portuguese hymns, but they now sing it in a Burmese language. They didn't know that was a Portuguese song, but they still sing it. One time the Portuguese guy look at the song in the the Myint's document. They sing a song. They didn't know that there was a Portuguese old traditional hymns. Then they told them that's the old Portuguese hymns that you are singing in Burmese. Then they were surprised. That is the old song. I don't know who translated into Portuguese or wrote that thing.
What could be done to kind of revive the very special feature and identity of these people? I mean, what could be done to boost, to further raise awareness? And what could Portugal do?
Yeah, one thing what I would like to do is to get these people to have some knowledge about their background history. That's why I wrote this after I wrote that in English.
Yes, we have the Burmese
version.
Yes, the Burmese
because
version.
That way the villages or the other Burmese people can read it in the Burmese language. They will understand that, because that will teach them that know their own history about themselves. That's why I wrote it in Burmese.
And now you're in Macau for a reason, or more than a reason.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I came here because of the Pope is coming. Yeah. There are two reasons I came here. First thing is the Pope is coming to Burma, so I thought, well, I'll go and visit that time when he is there. At the same time, when I go there, Macau is on the way to Burma, so I stopped by because Mr. Goncalo and
Gonçalo César Sá, yes.
Yeah, International Institute of Macau and the Gradiva Publishing Company in Portugal, they all sponsored to translate into Portuguese for this book. Mm-hmm. First in English, and then now it's a Burmese, and then next one is going to be Portuguese. So I want to see these people who's helping me, so that's why I came here. I really want to meet these people who are interested in this history, that's why.
And it's a particular significance, I would say, to have, of course, a Portuguese version of this book. You just mentioned that you were in Myanmar to follow Pope Francis' visit,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Well, that was a miracle. The Burmese people consider this a miracle, because no pope have ever visited Burma, or most of the popes don't even know where Burma is, including to involve with Burma thing is very hard. But now, because of this Pope Francis, he was so interested, and he's so his idea is to go and see these poor people. So last year, the first cardinal was elected from Burma. His name is Cardinal Charles Bo. He is also from one of those descendants from the Portuguese, from Monla village. So when the Pope is going to come, I asked the bishop, he is coming, I want to come and see too. I want to join this Pope visit and have a mass in there. So Pope came, and there was a national ceremony for Burma that time. The Prime Minister, the President, the party leaders and defense ministers and all the military leaders, they all come and wishes him and give him a gift and things like that. Because it is a very tragedy time in Burma at that moment. So the Pope came and talked about the peace and reconciliation between the ethnic groups and religious groups. So that was a good show. That his coming to Burma was a good sign. They believed that because of the Pope's arrival to Burma, we're going to have peace in the future.
You mentioned, of course, because it's been making headlines over the past few months, the crisis in the Rakhine state with the Rohingya.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a show on its own to talk about this matter. But if possible, in a nutshell, what's your take on the current situation and the way forward?
This is Burma problem in the Western Rakhine is a very complicated issue. It is very hard for the other people to understand from outside, because there are many things involved in there. Not just, Arakkans with these Muslims and Buddhists and things like that. There are other issues that we have to concentrate on there. Even though there's a violation of human rights and other crises in there, the Burmese people or the whole country is concentrating for the transition to the democratic system. Because Burma has been under the military government for almost 60 years. So now with this Aung San Suu Kyi government trying to change into democratic system, only 2 years after that, it's still very early and starting to, just like a baby stage for the democratic system. They don't want to lose that thing. They don't want to turn back the clock and get into other problems. So even though this crisis in Arakan is a very important issue, we don't want to affect the transition of the democratic system. Because to do this problem to solve, it will take some years. That we understand that they are human beings, we have to care about them, so they will do that. Because Aung San Suu Kyi already established some kinds of committee with the very experienced international political leaders to involve in there to settle the problem. So they were going to do it gradually because Kofi Annan is also giving advice to Aung San Suu Kyi how to settle the thing. So they were going to do gradually, slowly, bring them back, settle them, join with the Burmese and put it to work together in a peaceful way. But it will take some time, but it will settle in the future.
You would agree, though, that this has been, to some extent, tarnishing the international image of Myanmar and even of Aung San Suu Kyi herself, a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Yeah, that is true. It is a very embarrassing thing for her to face this kind of thing. In this day, in the world, political leaders all over the world, any country's leader, there's nobody like her that has sacrificed for the nation. She sacrificed so much for the people in Burma. She lost her husband when she was seriously ill. She was not allowed to meet him. She was not allowed to go out of the country to meet him on his dying bed, and he died. He passed away without her. And he has to stay separated for the children. He has 2 sons, and they are very rare to meet her. So that's some of the sacrifice she did it for her own self. On the other hand, the country was under the military government for 60 years. To change it into the democratic system is very hard. The 60 years period, the people born at that time, they have a total different mentality to cope with the new system or democratic system is very hard. Like teaching the kindergarten kid about the university course, like that. The big gap between that thinking and implementation of the system. So it'll take some years, and she will sacrifice. She will do all this, embarrassing things, how the world is treating her. She understands that. But she will do it in a peaceful way to let the people know how she cares about the human being, about the arrogance and other people in the country. So she will do gradually by her words as well as his action to prove it later on. It will come. But you have to be patient.
And I mean, your perspective on the longer-term development of the country, is it becoming open not only for business but also for cultural exchanges? Because it's still regarded as a place with a number of hidden cultural and touristic treasures, of course.
Yeah.
And in this respect, room for exchange and further ties with Portugal, with the Portuguese-speaking countries, with Macau?
Yeah, I spoke to the previous Burmese ambassador in Burma. Portuguese ambassador in Burma, Mr. Lewis. He was very interested in that. So I approached him, after 400 years, you guys left it in the jungle. Now it's the time to reconnect it with them. So he went to the village, to my village, Chandayua. He went there and he saw the people so poor and he was so sad. And even when he get to the church, there's a picture in there about the church, they rebow their marriage in the church. They like a remarriage in the church because it's just so much to his old time that he saw all the Portuguese descendants in this poor village. So he was so sad. Then he said, we want to help you guys one way or another. So first what they did was they sent one of the priests to Portugal to finish his PhD. That's the first time the Portuguese government assisted to educate one of the Portuguese descendants after 500 years. But there are other plans. We are thinking about doing some more other works.
So people-to-people ties would be the way ahead, right?
Yeah.
What else, could be done in terms of reconnecting?
There are other ways. What I would like to tell the Portuguese government or Portuguese business people is this is a chance, this is an opening door for them to get into there, do some small business and learn the whole country's, know the knowledge about the culture, business, and the way they work. And then you can expand because this is a new market for the Portuguese where they really needed to expand the business, the economy, because Burma is very rich. You name it, they have it there.
In terms of natural resources?
National resources. You name anything, resources, oil, gas, gold, silver, copper, everything in there. So all they need to do is go in there, start a small business and learn the country's wealth and then expand the business. Because it's been so long that they have been not connecting to each other, not knowing each other, even though they have been friends for the last 500 years. Now it's the time to reconnect with them.
And one final question, in a sort of full circle of our conversation.
Yeah.
These people, these characters, many of them, or most of them, anonymous characters in the history of Burma, and of Portugal in Asia. Are there still many stories to be told? I'm talking about, of course, the case of Burma, but also of the Portuguese presence elsewhere in South Asia and Southeast Asia.
Yes, because this book is only one part of this, up to 1613. Yeah. There are more stories to tell about how these Portuguese were involved in Burma, because this is up to the end of the Taungoo dynasty, which is about 1680, like that. That's the end of the Taungoo dynasty, where the Portuguese were involved so much. They fought for the Burmese kings in every part of the war, every part of Asia, like that. And then after the Taungoo dynasty end, there's another dynasty called Swe dynasty, it's a compound dynasty. At that time, these Portuguese descendants, they don't become Portuguese anymore. They are the Portuguese descendants of the Burmese people. But they consider themselves Portuguese, but they call themselves now the Myint. And they continue to serve the next dynasty until the end of the Burmese king in 1885. Even our great-great-grandparents said, we are the last soldiers that defend the Burmese king in 1885. When the British soldiers surrounded the Burmese palace in Mandalay, they have been taking over the kings. Slowly the kings and the queens and the family left in the one chamber. There were Portuguese Swe, which mean the blood brothers. They are the only one that left in there to defend the king. And then the Burmese king, the moment he knows that I've lost the war, so he told the Portuguese Swe, that the kings at palace guard, don't fight anymore, I'm going to surrender. So they are the last military, personnel that defends the Burmese king. These are the Portuguese descendants.
And are you, this is the very final question now, are you planning a follow-up volume? Yeah.
The next one is going to be the historical perspective of the Kenyan soldiers of Burma. That's only the history, no novel in there. It'll be all the dates and time and all the notes where I got it, all the proof. Then the next one is going to be the Kenyan soldiers part 2, which is the next dynasty during the compound dynasty. At that time, the Portuguese will become a Burmese, born in Burma, and they become a Burmese citizen. And they will still continue to serve the Burmese king to the end of the 1885, until the Burmese were gone and under the British government. So a lot of people think Burma is called by the British. They thought the Burma was given by the British to become called Burma, but it's not. Burma was known as a Burmania by the Portuguese, for many years, since 1500s. Only when the British came to India and started to expand the British or English-speaking language influence in Asia, one of the priests went to India and learned some English. Then he came back and he called this, instead of Burmani, he made it into Burma. So actually, Burma was given by the Portuguese, not by the British. Nobody knows that. Even the British, one of the British high-ranking officers, I didn't know that. I thought we are the one called.
Well, actually, that happens with a number of places, cities, islands, etc., all over Asia. And also Africa, of course, and America. James Myint Swe, thank you very much.
Oh, I thank you very much for you. Yeah, I like
fascinating stuff.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much.
Pleasure to have you on the show. And by the way, once your new book is out, you are invited to come on to the show and share your expertise and knowledge with us.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And to you at home, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week.